Hi, my name is Catherine Udera, and I did my presentation on a exhibit at the Chicago History Museum. This exhibit was entitled Back Home, Polish Chicago. So there are a lot of Polish people in Chicago, and a lot of them attributed pieces and artwork and information to this museum. The Polish population actually has its second largest population in the city of Chicago, which is second to Warsaw in Poland. And part of the reason that I chose to do this exhibit was that ethnically, on my mother's side, I am Polish. So I found it to be really interesting. I could make my own personal connections, and I really liked that it was about a population that you see a lot of in the city of Chicago or in our area that we all live in. So a little bit more about it, just some general information about the museum exhibit. Preparation actually began back in 2015, which makes it about 8 years in the making. So it took a lot of hard work, a lot of people contributed, and then the installation itself, so putting all the pieces in place, all of that sort of like physically creating the exhibit took about 18 months, so a year and a half. And then opening day was really recently. It was May 20th of 2023, so it's been open for just shy of 2 weeks at this point, which I thought was really cool as well. That this was a newer exhibit. It wasn't something that I thought necessarily many people would have selected for this assignment. I wanted to do something that wasn't too well known. So I thought it was really cool. And then also, it closes June 2024, so it will be about a 13-month exhibit, and then it's actually going to travel all of the artwork and every piece of the exhibit is going to travel to Warsaw after June 2024, and they will actually have their own exhibit in a museum in Warsaw. So you'll see also a lot of collaboration between people from Chicago who are Polish and people who are Polish living in Warsaw. As we kind of go further into some more slides, there was a lot of contribution from both cities since they will both actually partake in having this exhibit in their own city. So one of the first exhibits that I found to be really interesting when I attended was this first art exhibit. It is a Polish wedding dress. So in this portion of the exhibit, as you can see, there is on the right the physical wedding dress. So this is the actual one. It is not a replica that this woman in the picture on the left wore at her wedding. So the picture on the left is the actual bride who wore the dress as well as her groom on their wedding day. Some really interesting things about this picture is that um, this wedding dress was created in 1947, and the material that was used to make the wedding dress was actually made from U.S. Army surplus parachutes. So 1947, we're talking World War II time, so they could not necessarily afford all the materials that one would typically see being used to create a wedding dress. So yes, it was made out of surplus parachutes, which I thought was really just very a unique way of using material. And then we got to learn a little bit about this couple. They actually met at a Nazi forced labor camp. So that's another thing I've always learned personally about my own history is that, when the World War II was going on, the Nazis definitely infiltrated Poland. And there's a lot going on with the Nazi camps in Poland. So the fact that this couple could, have that connection, and then here they are in Chicago. They're, like I said, it was a U.S. Army surplus parachute, so they are U.S. citizens at this point. The fact that they met there and then they came to America, I just thought that was a really good story to tell, and I feel like a lot of people, including my own family, has a similar story, that they escaped such hardship and then they came to America, and then as you can see by just the material that her wedding dress was made from, there was continued hardship. However, I would expect this to have been a little bit easier, lighter of a life than it was for them in Poland. So then the next art exhibit I thought was really an interesting thing. It's something that was new to me. Um, this is a paper cutting type of art form that is very common in Polish culture. Again, something I wasn't very aware of, even though I am Polish, where they cut out these beautiful like flowers and other just gorgeous pieces of art, and then they just made it out of paper. The artist, there was a little bit of a snippet in this exhibit where you got to kind of learn about the artist and how she made this. Her name is Andrea Jablonski. She shared that she didn't actually make this exhibit piece from paper because she knew that it was going to last 13 months in the Chicago location and then go on to Warsaw. So she did use wood for this, which I thought was pretty unique. You know, she's using her ingenuity to create something so that others can see this historical artwork of the paper cutting from the Polish culture. And then the next art exhibit that I found to be really interesting was this Monika Luzinska, and she had images of herself. This is actually a self-portrait, a photograph of the artist herself with both of her passports. So as you can kind of see, that further behind one has that navy color we all are very known, and it is our U.S. passport. And then the more maroon colored one in the front is her Polish passport. So a lot of what I learned with people who participated and contributed to this exhibit, their first identity is that they're Polish. And so that's what you can kind of see in this picture. She chose to put the Polish passport in the front. And then many of them, including the woman who had just created those paper cutouts, she considered herself to be a Chicagoan and then a U.S. citizen. So they had all of these levels of their identities. However, they always thought themselves to be a Polish person first. And then this woman, Monica, shared a bit of her story where you got to learn that she immigrated and then her parents actually sent her a letter. So she's immigrating without her parents. She was the first generation American in her family. And her parents sent her a letter just essentially saying, believe in your dreams, you can do this. There's a reason you immigrated. There's a reason for all this hardship. There's going to be a big payout for you in the end. You're going to be happy that you made this decision. So I thought that was really interesting to kind of learn about her background, and then also to see her as a successful artist in a museum in Chicago. So it sounds like all of the hard work she put into coming to America really did pay off, because now she does seem to be pretty successful. And then the next exhibit was a male artist named Andrzej Krakowski, and his was pretty interesting. His idea for his art exhibit, you can see in this picture he's creating it, it was to create sort of the typical kitchen that you would find in Poland. He used a lot of windows in his art, which I thought was really interesting. And there was a reason behind that you kind of learned as you walked through this part of the exhibit, was that he wanted you to look out the window at the church. And he thought this was a very typical thing to see if you are in Poland. You're looking out the window, you're seeing a church. It's a very religious, typically Christian Catholic type of country. So that part was really important to their own culture. And he, coming from Poland himself, wanted to incorporate kind of what you would typically see in Poland, but into a museum that happens to be in Chicago. And he worked really hard to preserve some of these older windows. He did not create everything from scratch. He took older pieces and kind of made them, as you can see here, he's kind of chipping away at that paint, improving upon it, just kind of making it seem like a typical place that you would walk into in a house in Poland. And then the next one I found to be really interesting because a lot of the previous exhibit pieces I talked about had more to do with Poland itself, whereas I shared at the very beginning of this presentation that Chicago has the second largest Polish population in the world, only second to Warsaw, Poland itself. So I was really excited to see a piece that had to do with Chicago as well as the Polish ethnicity. So you can see here Tony Pyatt. He played for the Chicago White Sox, and so they have this plaque in honor of him. And I found it really interesting. I kind of learned a little bit of a backstory behind it. This isn't actually a piece in the exhibit itself because it was too big to fit. So instead of incorporating it into the exhibit, they ended up putting it right outside. So as you walk in, you see it. right before you enter the doorway into the museum. And I also learned that they had to reinforce this piece because of how heavy it is. They needed to make sure to reinforce the wall so that it could stay in place for that long. So, like I said, again, I found it really exciting to see that kind of Chicago Polish connection with somebody that many people know and love if you are from Chicago. So yeah, as you can see, there was a lot of different history. There was stuff that I knew about previously. There was stuff that I was learning for the first time, and I felt really, really connected to my own culture and heritage. And I was really excited to see that they incorporated this for all of the large population of Polish people in Chicago. I also like that this is an exhibit, so this isn't something that's going to last for a long time. It's 13 months, and then they're going to move it. I know there is a Polish museum in Chicago, but I like that this exhibit kind of gives you the chance to see this information all about Poland, but then, 13 months from now, they might put in an exhibit about a different culture. So that's kind of why I chose to do the Chicago History Museum, because history is not about one specific culture, but it's ever changing and there's different aspects, especially in America, which we call the melting pot. There's so many different cultures combined here. So I like that they pinpointed and specifically focused on one culture for these 13 months, but the fact that if we go back in 2 years, there may be a completely different culture that we get to learn all about. So that was just my experience there. I know there were many other pieces. These were kind of the ones that I really found to be the most interesting personally, but it's definitely something I would recommend if you can get to before the end of June, especially, or regardless, honestly, of if you are Polish or not. I just thought it was a really unique way to display the history of a culture that's